Good morning, everybody. John Sviokla here for GAI Insights, bringing you your GenAI news, putting thoughts in your head and time in your day, rating the top news essential, important, or optional. Today we have Paul, Adam, Tim, and Ankash. And we've got some interesting stuff all the way from a new Perplexity model to unbelievable new capability in terms of facial coordination and the creation of videos and expression. So please subscribe or like our channel here if you like it. And Ankash, let's get started with the first article.
Thanks, John. John, if you can bring up my screen, please.
Oh, there it is. Got it. Didn't see it on my little dashboard here.
Yes. So the first one that we have for today comes from Perplexity, and it talks about a new feature in their Pro Search called reasoning mode.
Yeah, Perplexity, one of my more favorite robots. What do you think here, Adam?
So, first of all, just for people who aren't aware, Perplexity does have free usage of the Pro model every day. You get a certain limited amount. You have to make sure when you're doing a search, you just click the little Pro button and then it'll go into the Pro mode. Definitely worth using. I would say it's probably debatably the best search engine out there right now, and they've just made it a lot better. They claim you can ask multi-layered questions and it will adapt, and they have some examples with prompts in that post there. I was considering calling it essential, but I think I'm dialing it back to important news. It is a big step forward. Perplexity, I feel, is extending their lead as the top, effectively, AI search engine on the market. But I took one of those prompts and I put it into ChatGPT 4.0 and was able to get the same output. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a marketing gimmick, I feel. I don't understand technically under the hood if there's more to it. But like, I think one of the first prompt example was read all of Bezos's annual shareholder letters, compile a table of the key takeaways from each year, and ChatGPT can do that. I mean, I took a couple of them and I put them through, and OpenAI has the capability. This is a lot more accessible. This is more designed towards really presenting the results in a search-friendly manner. So I fell on important news for the overall rating.
All right. So you were headed for essential, but saw that it was really just competitive with some of the folks already out there. All right. Paul, Tim, what do you think?
I was sort of on the optional side, but I could go with important. I mean, it's a big brand already, and so for that reason, it's worth paying some attention. But yeah, I saw it. They didn't explain what was so special about it, and as Adam said, you can already do this with most of these robots. So it's like, what's the big deal here?
Paul,
And I guess
But
the only thing I'll add there is we'll talk a little later. There's an article about what does it even mean that these things are reasoning, right? And they're saying introducing their reasoning model. So we'll get into it a little later. But let's take
sounded like catch up marketing to OpenAI to me. So I was on the optional road.
Paul, you're headed for optional.
You're on mute,
Can't
Paul.
hear you.
I was on optional as well. I'm a huge Perplexity fan. John and I were at a top 10 bank yesterday. It was their whole board meeting, a whole board and the management team. And I was, I guess we're just so close to this. I bet half the room wasn't aware of Perplexity. So, I love the product, but I think this is a catch up, a really important catch up, but optional.
All right. Looks like we're headed for optional. Ankash, optional it is.
Okay, the next one that we have comes from Google DeepMind, and it talks about a new generative AI tool which is opening the door for music creation.
Yeah. So all kinds of new controls on this, the ability to generate more dynamically. What do you think here, Tim?
Well, I think it's beautiful and fascinating. I think it's optional for the AI leader. I think obviously if you're in the music or even the video business, because there's one that goes along with YouTube for creating soundtracks to YouTube videos, then this is essential. It's not entirely out yet, so there's a little bit of hold back on that front. But wow, the stuff they do here is incredible, and they're giving some very powerful tools into the hands of lots of people for creating various kinds of music. In particular, by doing multi-layered things. So up until now, you can sort of give these music like Suno and these others a prompt and say, you know, create me some techno pop or some rock and roll or some this or that. But this one, you can actually give it multiple prompts and then dial in with a slider how much you want that particular influence. So I want some jazz and I want some rock. So I want to get fusion basically. And you can dial in, well, I want a little less rock and a little more jazz. So lots of interesting user interface tricks and some upgraded models. So looks great if you're in the music business or creating soundtracks for YouTube videos. But other than that, interesting, but not optional.
But Tim, I like how you talked about it, though. I mean, really, this is not an indication of, at the end of the day, this is all just bits. And the users can move the bits around for visual stuff. Here, users are moving around for audio and music.
Yep. Mostly this is, there's a little bit of model improvement here, but mostly it's user interface stuff on top of what they've already done. And it looks nice. And I'm a pretty hard-assed critic of most user interfaces. So I like this one. Looks pretty nice.
And Tim, you're a musician as well, is that right?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there you go. You're not only a software guy, you're a musician too. Here we go. So that's all right. So we're headed for optional on this. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I agree. Leave it at that.
You know, it's funny. I do get the feeling like when we just went over these two, we are in the realm of, hey, you know, magic is just normal now. I mean,
if someone's never heard of Perplexity or this kind of technology, it would be absolutely mind-blowing, right? And we're like, optional news.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna run into that a couple of more times, I think, too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And John, I know we talked a lot about what's the right mix of kind of technology and use cases on these daily news calls. That's why I think for these AI leaders, starting to dial more and more the use cases to help them sort through this exploding plethora of tools is just critical.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we're going optional here, but optional but amazing.
Do we have a comment from Kevin?
Yeah. Oh, Kevin, yeah, interesting. Will he embrace or reject such AI tools? Kevin, you know, I'm not so sure it's going to be by generation. I think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a young old thing. I think it's going to be. I bet it'll kind of along a different dimension, which is folks who are kind of stuck in their ways in terms of how they generate stuff. I mean, you look at somebody like a Walt Disney. You know, he was constantly taking the new technology and reinventing. You know, all right up when he died, right? And so, I think the vast majority of people learn one way to do stuff, and then every once in a while you get a genius that explores the frontier, and I think it's age independent myself. But
Tim or others, have you guys seen anybody who's using AI to mirror the music to visuals? So you have AI generated visuals that match the music?
I haven't, but I'm not in that world.
Okay.
And in fact, I was thinking, oh gosh, if I made a video, this would be cute, because music definitely helps videos along. So I'm sure it's going to happen if it's not happening already.
Yeah, Paul, I'm blanking on the name right now. I'll pull it later in the call if I can remember. But I know of one that's audio reactive text to video. So you can actually bring in a song and, for example, tie the zoom in rate to the bass.
Right.
And those sorts of things. So they're definitely starting to come to market.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like a part of the role of music is emotional management and, you know, uplifting or downlifting. To do that visually as well and have the AI come up with options of that, it seems like that's here now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I always think of it as you get the first map over has a kind of a parallel affordance. And what I mean by that is in, you know, the book, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman, who, you know, Tim knows well. You know, you basically map your mental model from the old world to the new world. Like, and if you talk to Dan Bricklin, the inventor of the spreadsheet, you know, he was very conscious of this. And then after you use it for a while, you know, you start to reconfigure how you think about the problem. And, you know, to your point, like right now we're thinking tracks and audio separate from video and so forth. Paul, we might have expressions like, I need this feeling in somebody. And
That's
then, yeah. And so, but, and now Dan, being the genius that he is, he understood that he was creating a matrix language in the representation of a spreadsheet, and that matrix language would, in fact, evolve to lots of other things, which it has, right? But the first map over, the first affordance was from the traditional, debits and credits.
Yeah, and that's what's going to want. We've got large language models, which is text. So we're going to move to large emotion models. I just want anger, and it's going to give me audio and visual and movies and.
Yeah, when Rayport and I were doing the market space course back in the mid '90s, we said, look, the world's going to go from standard industrial codes to standard experience codes. I want this experience, and so how do I get there? And Amazon's certainly there. Joe Pine's written about this eloquently, along with Gilmore. Anyway, all right, optional. Next, Ankush.
Okay, the next one comes from OpenAI, and it's a research paper which talks about simplifying, stabilizing, and scaling continuous time consistency models.
Yeah, I kind of understood this article. My impression is that this is an important thing about the continuity of these the consistency of these models. But right now, I would put it as an optional read for our AI leader. The math in here, it seems like it was done by one researcher. Enables way better consistency across these diffusion models as they're being generated. But it didn't strike me as something that our AI leader really needed to worry about at this time. But what do other folks think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's interesting, and this is basically an optimization. So it's a diffusion model.
Yeah.
But it's sort of trying to short circuit. The diffusion model is basically, I think of it like, sculpture, right? They're starting with basically random stuff and then peeling it away to make some sense out of it. So creating a sculpture out of a block of stone kind of thing. And so it takes a lot of work to do that, a lot of revealing to do that. And this is saying, well, I can do it in one pass instead of 100, basically, or 2 passes instead of 100. So that's a huge optimization. So that may be transformative if it really pans out in practice, because now real-time diffusion starts to become possible. So we'll see, but that's what it's about. It's optimization of an existing technique. So interesting. We'll see how much it impacts the way things are done.
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point, Tim, that a number of these optimizations get particularly interesting when you get past the threshold effect, whether it's, perceived time or, the ability to go, with no latency and so forth. All the stuff that our mutual friend Alan Kay worried about so many years ago, right?
Yep.
In terms of the flow of the work. Adam, you okay with optional on this?
Yeah, I'll just note, we had the article last night about Stable Diffusion 3.5, and one of their models was Turbo, which could effectively get almost the same quality in only 4 passes. So this is a trend we're starting to see across the diffusion models.
Yeah, I think that the conversation that Paul and I were having yesterday with the senior execs at this bank, one of the things I think people really don't appreciate is just how the magic that we have now, the AI that we have, the generative AI that we have now, is so brute force and so dependent on all kinds of computation and just the first pass at the math, if you will, and just how dynamic the optimization and algorithm work is. Right now, I just don't think people have a feel for it, because we haven't seen that kind of improvement in software for many, many years. You know what I mean? In hardware, people are expecting all kinds of, massive improvements, but it hasn't been back, I would say, since the, early days of, of operating systems and so forth, where you saw such massive software improvement.
John, I think that's a great point in software. Adam, we're doing this show for like SaaS software. We could do it like once a year for 10 minutes. There wasn't this rapid innovation and interface for Salesforce CRM or.
Yeah. This is back like when Alan Kay was working at Xerox PARC. where they were figuring out, okay, well, you can do, you can solve that with bitmap graphics, or maybe you can do it some other way. And, the performance, you're starting to get latencies that are imperceptible. I mean, I remember watching I was talking to Alan about the mother of all demos with Doug Engelbart in 1968, where they show, split screen video, bitmap graphics, hierarchical decomposition, object oriented, programming. And Alan, cornered me. He said, did you see what the response time was like? I said, yeah. He said, you know why it was that way? I said, no. He said, because we built it that way. Anyway, and the response time was better than you have on this friggin' Mac supercomputer I have right now. And they were working with, what was it, Tim? Was it 8-bit, or it was probably 16-bit machines back then? 16-bit.
Well, they didn't really have. They were all over the map because they were customized machines. But you have to remember,
Right.
They built the screens out of oscilloscopes. They didn't even have screens. They built the whole thing from scratch. But again, they had this. They understood that beyond 100 milliseconds, you start to lose engagement if
Right.
you don't respond within 100 milliseconds. And so they just took that as a given. Yeah, Alan gives that lecture all the time. He says, because the other one that's amazing is they had a 2.5D animation studio built in 1972. So he has this video of a flying horse, basically, and you can modify the animation in real time. So you can paint wings on the horse as it's moving in real time. That machine was 6 megahertz. Okay. So with 120K of memory or something like that. And he says, how do you think they got this to respond like this? And of course, the audience of computer science will say, I don't know. And he said, well, they wanted it to. And,
Right.
If you have to have a design point that says this is really important in order to have real responsive machines. So that, yes, responsive design is an oxymoron for me. It's like, okay, responsive design means before I fall asleep at the screen, something will happen.
Yes. No, it's amazing. And I think we're seeing that kind of improvement again. All right.
I hope so.
I hope so. Akash, next.
Optional nonetheless.
Optional nonetheless.
Okay, the next is a blog which talks about 3 recent papers about robustness of reasoning and problem solving in LLMs.
All right, Adam, before you dive into this thing, can I just vent? I mean, is it surprising to anyone that a probabilistic system does better with things that have high probability? I mean, it's like, what? Anyway, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say essential, but you're taking me down a notch. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. No, so basically what this article is exploring is what does reasoning mean? What's the research lately, and what is all the hyperbole and what's hype and what's real about these models like 4.0 and then 0.1 that are claiming to now be reasoning models, like we just saw earlier with Perplexity as well. And I'll quote in the bottom of the article. It says, in conclusion, there's no consensus about the conclusion, right? So basically what they found is, as John, you're alluding to, that when you ask it to do things that are more likely or that it has more familiarity with, it's much better at them. And when you go for the sort of quarter cases or the things that debatably might require more reasoning because it's not something it's encountered before, it doesn't do as well. But these are probabilistic models, so that shouldn't be coming as much of a surprise. So I gave this an optional.
Can we require that anybody who codes, for AI has to take some epistemology or, something?
Everybody should have to take it, but that's a whole nother story. Yeah, I actually, Melanie, I would recommend to people, Melanie Mitchell's an important AI figure, and she's worth subscribing to. I try and read many different viewpoints. Again, Marvin Minsky a long time ago said, if you don't see something from at least 3 different conflicting viewpoints, you don't really understand it. And so Melanie's, I would say, a middle of the roader. And then there's people like Gary Marcus I would encourage reading, who's a naysayer and a AI hater almost. He's an AI guy, but he doesn't like this machine learning stuff. And then you have, the other end of the spectrum, which we have a lot of right now, of people who are just totally enthused by it. Anyway, I would agree this is optional. It's interesting. You know, we could give it the important, John, from your, well, if you have time to read it, it's an interesting article for understanding a little bit better. And she writes reasonably well. And I think it's a little bit beyond what you're saying about statistical probabilities. In fact, the one thing that, although there's nothing surprising here, the big issue with LLMs is, first of all, is defining reasoning. And in particular, the big difference still between human reasoning, because we don't have better terms for it, and these LLM reasonings is, if you show a 4-year-old 5 pictures of a cat and then you show it a lion, they're usually pretty good at saying, oh, that's a big cat. But if you show an LLM 1 million pictures of a cat and then show it a lion, it'll maybe know it's a lion, a kind of a cat, but maybe not. And that's only after 1 million pictures. So the ability to abstract is not very strong. And that's what they showed here a number of times. And the ability and part of that is, you know, if you put extra words into a word problem that are unrelated to the problem itself, then they get really confused really fast. So they get distracted easily by things because they're looking at it statistically. If you put words in there, they treat all the words as equally important. Whereas a human will immediately recognize, oh, if they're talking about something completely unrelated to the problem, I don't even think about it, and my brain just says those words aren't that important. I just exclude them. But an LLM doesn't have any mechanism for doing that, at least the current ones. So I'm fine with optional.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, my problem with Gary Marcus is he does the Fox News thing, which is he takes the idiot example, and then can you believe the woman doing this?
Yeah, I agree. I don't agree with a lot of what Gary Marcus says, but I think it's important to read him.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, I'd rather read somebody who's more grounded. But he's
well, you have to find them. If you have a better one, let me know.
Okay, fair enough.
John Sfiocla. There's only one, Tim. Who are we talking about here?
No.
John's not critical. You have to find somebody on the other side of the camp.
Yeah,
this is true. All right, next optional it is.
Okay, the next one comes from Runway. So Runway has released a new feature, which is AI facial expression motion capture feature called Act 1.
Yeah, this is kind of fun when you look at, if you watch the video, I was impressed by the level of expression on this thing. What do you think, Tim?
Well, I think it's maybe important for people to read, but I'm biased because I have my citizen hat that I can't totally put away. And I think it's important to understand. I think this is really, really beautiful and fascinating and really, really dangerous. And we just don't take it seriously enough as a society. So as an AI leader, do I need to worry about this day to day? Not really, unless I'm in the video business of one sort or another, and this is really relevant to the work that I do and the workflow that I do. In which case, it's fabulous. It is unbelievable. And this has been happening for a while. There's actually an app called Sportsbox that's been around for a few years now that works on sports things, golf, baseball, and swinging sports. And you take one video with your phone, and it will give you a 3D representation of all the major movements of your body. So this has been coming for a while. Faces are really hard. That's why this is such an amazing improvement, because faces are so subtle and the movements have such an impact. So this is big, but it's scary to me because, man, now you think about the scams that are possible if your son, your grandson, somebody important to you calls up, it looks exactly like them. We know you can already sound exactly like them, and says, I need X right away. Or, if they say they have, protection and stuff built in. I don't know how you protect. That's you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So to me, this is important from the perspective, especially as a citizen, that we need to be paying more attention to this stuff. These are weapons. And we need to think about how they can be used as weapons, and relying on Runway to say, don't worry, or OpenAI or anybody, don't worry, we've got this covered, doesn't make me sleep well at night. But as a technology, it's fabulous.
Yeah, I was going to make the case for important or maybe essential because I think it's going to radically increase adoption for all the reasons you said. In terms of, I think it's going to radically increase the adoption of generated fakes or legit ones that people just want to do, right? Because a lot of the wooden, I think a lot of the woodenness of some of these things that have submitted for videos or new movies or whatever has to do with the fact that the facial expressions are so uh, you know retrograde compared to this. I don't know. Yeah, Vivek agrees with you, Tim, in terms of the security implications. Yeah, for sure.
It's terrific, and it will make for incredible creative energy, I think. But yeah, just I read this and I was like, holy, you know what? I
Right.
mean, how do you protect yourself from this stuff?
So
Well,
important,
I'm going to make
essential.
a case for optional.
Okay.
Runway already has video to video, so you can do style transfer. You can animate your face and then have it look like something else. I think this is an extension of that capability that they're sort of reskinning it from a branding and marketing perspective. And the idea that we can deep fake and that there's risks associated with it that we need to be concerned about certainly shouldn't be news to anyone. So it's the other thing I think which made it optional for me is that it's not available yet. There are people who are given access, but it's not something. I mean, I have an unlimited account on Runway. I should be one of the first people that has access to this, and I don't yet. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a product announcement for something that isn't even available yet.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's why I said I started it optional. I said the only reason I leaned toward important was for these larger reasons.
All right, we're headed for optionals. Can't get it yet.
Paul, what do you think?
Optional.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to ask Paul. I knew he was going to say optional.
Well, the
Go
thing
ahead.
is, we've had two people. The good news is we're getting a lot of good feedback on the news, which is great. But if you look at the news, one observation someone told me, this is all upside news, and it's almost like we need another news that just does the downside. To your point, Tim, it's the GenAI enthusiasts don't look at the downside, and that's who's running around talking about all the stuff right now.
Yeah, you want to get really in the downside. Just think about what this means for warfare. I mean, autonomy and warfare, and the minimum efficient, the minimum cost necessary to wreak havoc is going down tremendously. Whether it's on the fake side, well, if you go back to the Mueller investigation of the Russians, all the disinformation they did in the 2016 election only cost them it was $1.2 million a month, and they touched hundreds of millions of people. So for $15 million basically, which I don't know what a tank costs in Russia, you can probably build a tank for 15 million, whatever. For the price of a tank or a third of a jet, you affected hundreds of millions of people.
Well, and John, just take one thing in the news. The McDonald's is struggling with this what was the food poison they got out there. If you're one of their competitors and spend $500,000 and create 1 million different websites with blog posts amplifying that bad news, that's material corporate warfare.
Oh yeah,
on the corporate side.
Oh, and we're just starting to get there. I mean, you have guys like Bill Ackman buying a position and talking his book, talking it down. Imagine what short sellers can do with robots, right? I mean, yeah, that's going to get interesting. All right. All right.
We got a drop here soon, John. This is the last one?
Last one. USAA, two friends of ours, Tom Davenport and Randy Bean. Go for it, Ankash.
Yes, so this one talks about how USAA is using GenAI, primarily co-pilots.
Yeah, I was on this one. I think I was going to give this an optional. I think it's a great story. Tom and Randy are both great writers, good friends of the firm. Talks about what we would expect, which is that they're using GenAI largely internally to help their customer support agents and thinking, they've educated tens of thousands of folks, so they're taking this seriously. Looks like a Microsoft shop in terms of Copilot, but I was going to give this an optional. What do you folks think?
Optional. Yeah, it's good. And again, another good back pocket article, but they're, if anything, a little bit behind, it strikes me. I mean, their cases are internal. They're exactly the use cases we've been talking about forever: customer support, knowledge extraction for internal data, summarizing Slack channels, just exactly the kind of core application. Sounds like they've got a good approach. And so for the approach and the way they go about it, but there's not a lot of detail on that level. So it's not particularly helpful if you're trying to design something for a firm. So I'd
All
say
righty. Akash, we're going to try to make a half hour here. What's the tote?
I think it's a no hitter.
All optionals for today. Yeah.
Optional. Yep. All right. It's all optional today. We got a no hitter.
I think it's our second no hitter. I
Yes,
think
John.
we either have great inflation or
All right.
no hitter.
Nolan Ryan would be proud. All right. So we have a no hitter today. Any announcements, gentlemen?
No, I just think for people who weren't in Boston, John and I went to the Liquid AI product launch yesterday, and it was really impressive launch itself. And I think I certainly walked away impressed as I learned more about what the details doing. So they are, the headline is they are taking a fundamentally different architectural approach to large language models like what OpenAI does. And on paper and early trials, it's better performing, i.e. more accurate answers at way less energy and CPU usage. So, and they had a handful of major customers there using it, or certainly testing it.
Yeah, it was impressive. We shall see, because they could really make a dent if the technology works the way they want it to. All right.
cheaper.
What's that, Tim?
Better, faster, cheaper.
Better, faster, cheaper, and more explainable. Yeah, Ashish agrees. All right. Look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, and don't forget to subscribe and like. Bye now.